All right, well, welcome everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program to order. My name is Sarah Evans-Peters, and I serve as Vice Chair of the Commission. Thank you all for being here today and for your continued commitment to this amazing program. Let's see. As a reminder, we're being streamed on YouTube, so welcome to those online. Glad you're here. The meeting materials are available online. You guys have access online to all the same meeting materials that we do. The agenda is pretty awesome today. We're going to focus on the 2025 to 2027 spending plan adoption. And we get to hear from Dan Bigelow on the relationship between farm investment and agricultural conservation easements. So let's go around for a quick round of introductions. Again, I am Sarah Evans-Peters. I represent natural resources and I am appointed by the OWEB board. I live in Buena Vista, Oregon, which is just outside Independence. And I will pass it to the chair, Doug.
This is Doug Kramer. I'm a farmer out of St. Paul, Oregon, and I've been appointed by the ODA board and been on this commission for the lifetime of the commission so far. So thank you.
Amanda?
Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Lowe. I'm the OWEB appointed tribal representative on OAHC, and I'm out of Pendleton.
How about Dan?
Hey, Dan Bigelow from the Department of Applied Economics at Oregon State and representing OSU Extension.
Ed?
Hey, good afternoon. Ed Contreras, appointed by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and based in Klamath Falls.
How about Mark Vargas?
Yes, represent Fish and Wildlife, also appointed by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I'm in the, southern portion, southwest southern area.
Jan?
Did you say Jan?
I did. I should always say Jan Lee. There's just
Yes,
too many similar names.
I can't tell between Jan, Dan, but anyway, I'm Jan Lee and I represent the water quality position. I'm on the Water Resources Commission and the president of the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts.
John?
Hi, John O'Keefe, Department Ag appointee. I'm a rancher in Lake County. We've got a desert holdings and forest holdings, so nice diversity.
Laura?
Laura Masterson, also appointed by ODA. I grow organic vegetables in Multnomah and Yamhill County.
Nancy?
Hi, I'm the Department of Land Conservation and Development representative, and I'm over in Wallowa County. And in my day job, I run a legal program for the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts.
And I think last but not least, Mark Labhart.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Labhart. I'm a non-voting member representing the liaison to the OWEB board, and I sit on the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission.
And then Taylor, how about I turn it over to you for OWEB staff?
Sure. Okay, well, I'm Taylor Larson, and I'm the coordinator for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. Very happy to be here, and I'll pass it to Robin.
Hi, everyone. Robin Meacher. I am the Conservation Easement Specialist for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. And I'll pass
to Renee.
Thanks, Robin. You cut out a little bit, so thanks, Taylor. Renee Davis, Acquisitions and Special Programs Manager at OWEB, and we'll pass it to Ivy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivy Clark-Henry. I am an admin support staff here at OWEB and happy to be taking minutes and assisting with other logistical things today. So,
thank you very much, Ivy. And I think that's all the OWEB staff.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I think we're missing Jim Bob today, but maybe he'll show up. And I will pass it over to Doug for public comment.
Okay, so do we have any public comment today from anybody? You have anything, Taylor?
Yeah, so we received written public comment from OAT that you should have all gotten ahead of the meeting.
Yeah.
So thank you for those who sent it in. And then if folks are interested in providing verbal public comment, we did have 2 folks sign up, but just go ahead and raise your hand and Ivy can unmute you and you'll have 3 minutes to give your public comment. And we'll just take it in turn. Does that sound good, Doug?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't see that screen, so thank you.
Great. So I have Nellie McAdams signed up for public comment, and they have raised their hand. So Nellie, I'm going to unmute you and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ivy. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Chair Kramer, Co-Chair Evans Peters, and members of the Commission, my name is Nellie McAdams, and I am the Executive Director of Oregon Agricultural Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to give public comment. First, I want to support the staff recommendation of allocating the entire $1,760,000 in available grant funds to OAHP's Working Land Easements and Covenants grant program. Of OAHP's 4 programs, this one has the greatest potential for match funding, the greatest unmet demand, and the greatest impact for permanent conservation. We also ask that any unspent or returned funds from prior OAHP grant rounds also be directed to the easement program. We are grateful that OAHP received funding for the biennium, but we understand that because this 2-year allocation is only 1/3 of what the program received in prior 1-year cycles, all of the funds will likely be distributed in one grant round. We also support completing that grant round as soon as possible in order to demonstrate the benefits of the program and the unmet demand. For that to occur, the application period would likely open in September in order to process applications for a vote in early 2026. Given this timeline, I understand that it is not feasible for the Commission to develop a scoring rubric to be implemented in time for the upcoming grant round. But OAT strongly supports the creation of an OAHP easement grant scoring rubric as soon as possible. We recommended this rubric to be developed simultaneously with the grant making process in order to be ready for future funding. We and 2 other OAHP applicants have requested such a rubric because it creates clarity for us as applicants, the landowners we work with, and the review team. Scoring rubrics are standard for other easement programs that cover landscapes with as much agricultural diversity as Oregon, from the state of Washington to the entire country. Any such matrix should align not only with OWEB rules and statute, but with the scoring rubric of the Natural Resources Conservation Services ACEP-ALE program, which OAHP was designed to match. My testimony includes rubrics from Washington and NRCS as examples. OAT and other applicants would be glad to speak on a panel before the Commission about a scoring rubric and other ideas about the program and its application process from our unique vantage point as applicants. Public comment does not allow a chance for applicants to answer questions or engage with commissioners in dialogue about the program in general. As applicants, we want OAHP to be as successful as possible. Now that the program is entering its 3rd grant cycle, we would be grateful if the Commission called upon applicants as thought partners with a mutual interest in maximizing the impact and efficiency of OAHP. We'd be happy to participate in a panel as an agenda item at an upcoming OAHC meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ivy, you want to put the next one on, please?
I do. Carson Kendrick, I believe, signed up for public comment. You haven't raised your hand. Do you still want to proceed with that? There you are. Okay, thank you. And all right, go on ahead.
Ivy, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Chair Kramer, Co-Chair Evans Peters, and members of the Commission, thank you for the time today to testify at your August meeting. My name is Carson Kendrick, and I'm the Conservation Director at the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. I represent 32 member land trusts, soil and water conservation districts, and conservation orgs working across Oregon to protect and restore private lands in partnership with private landowners. Collectively, our members have protected over 780,000 acres of land across the state. I'm joining today to provide some feedback on the spending plan and evaluation rubric discussion. On the spending plan, I just wanted to share COLT's support for the OWEB staff recommendation to allocate the available funding to the Conservation Easement Grant Program, given the strong demand for program funds and the potential for federal match funding through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. As this commission may know, COLT worked diligently with our partners during the 2025 legislative session to secure additional funding for OAHP. We celebrated the $2 million investment as a win, given the tough budget environment this year, but recognize this is not nearly enough funding to meet demand across the state. So we will continue to educate on this program, its impact, and advocate for future funding with state legislators. I also wanted to thank the commission and OWEB staff for your recent discussions around creating a scoring rubric for the program. COLT supports these continued discussions between the commission, OWEB staff, and program applicants on the scoring rubric, with just an interest in increasing program transparency and ensuring applicants know which projects are a good fit for OAHP funds. Our understanding is that OAHP applicants have been supportive of some sort of rubric, as you've just recently heard from Nellie, and we would respectfully ask this commission to continue discussions and work towards the development of a rubric. Thank you again for your time and service to this commission and program. We are incredibly grateful for the time and thoughtful consideration commission members and OWEB staff consistently show OAHP. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, is there any others on the board, Ivy, or is that it?
No one else has
This would
signed
be-
up.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Taylor.
No, that's just what I was going to say, Ivy. Nobody else signed up. Usually we allow folks if they want to raise their hand and give public comment, but I don't see anybody else with their hand up, Doug.
Okay, well, that will be the end of public comment, so I'll turn it back over to Sarah for approval of minutes.
Thanks, Doug. Yep, that brings us to our next agenda item to review and approve the meeting minutes from June 10th. Did everyone get a chance to review? And if so, does anybody have any corrections or comments? John?
Yeah, I was double booked and I was a little bit late, but I did attend, and the attendance roster doesn't reflect that. I'm not on the roster. The only other thing is I spell O'Keefe with 2 F's and you guys don't, so maybe we could change that. Thank you.
So thank you for that, John. To be clear, is it spelled differently than how it is showing up on the Zoom screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you're trying to confuse us. I see what's going on.
You know, I'm not sure how that happened. I entered it, usually enter it properly when I enter it, but I'm not quite sure how that happened. So, yeah.
All right, any others?
I will move we approve the minutes as sent to us with the addition of John's name as an attendant of the meeting.
Second.
Great, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jan. All right, so we've moved and seconded that we approve the minutes for our last meeting on June 10th. Any further discussion? Okay, I think we can go ahead for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Are you opposed, Jan, or are you just raising a hand? You're muted. Hold on.
No, I'm in support. I was just trying to remove my.
You're late. Okay. Okay. Any abstentions? All right. Motion has passed to approve the meeting minutes from June 10th with the addition to add John's name and correct the spelling of his name. And I will pass it back to Mr. Kramer for the meat of the meeting.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the main reason for this meeting today, and that's the approval of the spending plan. We're going to go ahead and let Taylor introduce or review that with us, and then we will have a vote at the end of our discussion on whether we approve that or not. Taylor?
Sure. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll just kind of give a high level overview of the situation, and then Doug, you can kind of help facilitate a conversation that gets all the details out there on the table folks need in order to make the decisions that are in front of you today. So basically, the recently concluded legislative session resulted in $2 million to be deposited into the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Fund. 12% of those, or 240,000, are to be used for operations to partially support 2 staff positions in supporting the program. And then 88%, or 1.76 million, is to be used for grant making. And so at the July OWEB board meeting, the board included the 1.76 million in their biennial spending plan for OAHP. And then today we're asking the commission to consider allocating the available grant funds to one or more of the existing OAHP grant programs. And in the staff report, I listed what those 4 are, just in case folks are a little rusty on that. But basically, high level, we have our Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easement Grant Program, our Conservation Management Planning Grant Program, a Succession Planning Grant Program, and a Technical Assistance Planning Grant Program. Both of those last 2 we have yet to run a cycle for. And due to the demonstrated demand for the Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easement Grant Program, staff are recommending the commission adopt the spending plan, allocating all the available funds, that 1.76 million, to the Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easement Grant Program to support an upcoming solicitation. Additionally, we're requesting that the commission weigh in and provide guidance to applicants in kind of 3 core areas. And those are, again, listed in the staff report, but I'll just go ahead and read them here right now to kind of tee up the discussion. So first off, whether the commission has any geographic considerations for this funding and this grant cycle. So for instance, are there geographic considerations that the commission wants to prioritize over certain other geographies? 2, whether the commission intends to place any funding caps or provide additional budget guidance to applicants for any of the grant programs the commission chooses to fund. And 3, related somewhat to what we were just hearing in public comment and talked about last time, if and or how the commission wishes to express a weighting of certain evaluation criteria over others. And so this is sort of based on the conversation we had at the last meeting in June, talking about a scoring rubric. Staff are not recommending the commission try to adopt a scoring rubric ahead of an upcoming cycle. But if there is an interest in weighting certain criteria over others in whatever cycle is coming out of this spending plan, I think it would be important for the commission to make that clear to applicants so that staff can incorporate that into guidance and folks can put applications together that reflect those priorities. So anyway, happy to answer questions and dive in deeper, but with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Doug to facilitate a conversation and then get us to a vote on the spending plan. Unless Renee or Robin have other things to add from OWEB's perspective.
Renee, do you want to chime in here at all?
I don't think I have much to add beyond the first 2 topics that Taylor outlined, the question of any interest from the commission in either broad geographic coverage for upcoming grant cycles or specific geographies and the topic of caps we've asked you about before we opened the most recent cycle, just wanting to make sure if there was any interest or inclination from the commission that we be clear on that. We have a $1.76 million allocation for funding. So if there is interest in any caps, we want to get that on the table before we open a solicitation, and it's not a requirement, just wanted to be mindful of that.
Okay, Robin, you got anything?
Mark has his hand up.
Just a question. I don't know if it's for you, Renee, or for Taylor, but for those who may be watching on YouTube, could you just briefly summarize what the legislature did to this budget item so that kind of give a background on why we are where we are?
I'll let you take that if you want, Renee.
Yeah, I'm not. So Mark, are you talking specifically about the grant funding and the amount available?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So, and Taylor, you may need to fill in some gaps because I'm not going to remember bill numbers at this point. But early in the 2025 legislative session, there was a standalone bill that would have provided significant funding. Memory holds maybe
31, I think, or
yeah. Okay. Maybe around $17.3 million in total between grants and operations for the program. As I think probably most of you are aware, as the legislative session went on and revenue forecasts closer to end of session emerged, things definitely became a lot tighter in terms of funding available across the state agency enterprise and the various demands on state budgeting. So ultimately that standalone bill did not move, but late in the legislative session, there was an allocation overall for OAHP within OWEB's budget of $2 million, as Taylor mentioned. That was one-time funding. And as allowed by statute, 12% of that helps to support operations for the program. The remaining amount is dedicated to grant funding. So that's how we ended up with the $1.76 million in funding. I don't think it was for lack of support for or interest in the program. It was a very challenging budgetary environment. And Mark, if there's more that you have questions about, just prompt me.
That does it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? Robin, I had called on you and I didn't hear from you. Do you have anything you want to add before we get into this discussion?
No, thanks, Doug. Sorry, I shook my head. And
that's okay.
Should have said.
I didn't see you on my screen. So anyway, okay. So to kick off this discussion, I'm going to go through those three items first. First of all, are any of us interested in limiting the geographical area that we will take applications from on this go round? Just to put my own 2 cents worth in on it first, I am not in favor of limiting the geographic area. It can be anywhere in the state as far as I'm concerned. If somebody has an opinion other than that, I surely want to hear it, and I'm going to guess the rest of our commissioners would too. So anybody got some comments on that?
Well, this Mark, I don't have comments necessarily on that, and I don't disagree with you at all right now, Doug, but a question I would have is if in the future, we wanted to, maybe if we develop a rubric and we're noticing a lack of projects and funding in certain zones, maybe in the rubric, we could say for X calendar year, we're adding a little bonus points for people in the Southwest, and we could do it that way too, if we need to in the future. So that's all.
Okay. And just real quick, what in the past we have seen projects come from all areas of the state. So that has been good. And I think we've done our best in the past to spread those projects out around the state so that we didn't disappoint any one region or area more than another. So I will give just a few seconds if anybody else wants to chime in on the geographic area. If
It's
not,
like Ed has his hand up, Doug.
Who does?
Ed.
Go for it, Ed.
Yeah, just for the sake of discussion, and I don't have, I'm not saying I have a preference for limiting the geographic scope, but in the future, if we were to take this approach, I feel like we would need really good data and information to support a change in our program. And so I'm just thinking of, if this is something that is of interest to folks, obviously we're discussing it here. It just seems like we would need more time to develop a thorough guidance and good documentation to try to prioritize certain regions of the state. It just seems a little hasty for us to bring our own perspectives and just throw it out there. So I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking about right now.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the geographic area?
Let me just chime in real quick. I don't want us to get stuck here, Doug, but I think the other side of this question and the reason it's in the staff report is all things being equal, does the commission have a preference to, as you kind of alluded to, Doug, spread the investments around the state? So you have two projects in the same county and a third project on the other side of the state. All things being equal, would you prefer to not fund the two projects right next to each other and spread things around? So I think that's kind of the other end of that question.
Okay. I had not thought of it in that perspective, but is that something that we could, at least in the past, we kind of looked at that when we were approving the projects? Is that something we could still continue to do at that time, or would you prefer us to voice our opinion at this point?
Again, all things being equal, I think it's best for applicants to have as much of the context as possible about how the commission is going to be making their decisions. But maybe I saw Robin raise her hand right as I was starting to speak, so probably has something more intelligent to say on that front.
No, I just wanted to note what we talked about before we launched the last cycle on this, because there was some discussion around I think it was like not necessarily a preference for one over another if there was multiple, but that would be a consideration in the commission's discussion. So in the program documents, guidance documents, we did put a note in there that just stated that the commission recognized the broad geographic scale of the need and interest in working lands conservation around Oregon. So we didn't state that there was an explicit desire to fund across, like that would be a consideration necessarily. But so that's how we've kind of touched on this before. I think it's what Taylor was noting is that if there is going to be a consideration around kind of geographical distribution of ultimate award, then it would be nice for our applicants to know that will be a consideration.
Okay. And I agree with, maybe the commission does need to go on record saying our preference has been to spread these projects around the state as much as possible. I just don't want to see us hem ourselves in too much. If we have two really good projects in Eastern Oregon and not such a good project in the Willamette Valley, I'd prefer to do the two good projects, but I agree that doesn't necessarily spread them around the state as much. But if you have three projects that are equally good and you can only do two of them, let's try and spread those out as much as possible. I think that's been the attitude and the desire of the commission since we've been doing it, but that probably is not written in any sort of document. Is that true, Taylor?
Not so explicitly, which is why we're trying to get you to say it so we can articulate it clearly to applicants. I do see a couple hands up, Doug. Can you see those? You want me to call
No,
them?
I cannot see hands on my screen.
Okay.
So please.
All right. So Jan, yours is up first, and then Laura.
Okay, well, I agree with having a statement as was described, because we wouldn't really want two to be in the same basin unless there was such an overpowering reason for that to occur. And I see it more from a basin perspective. Eastern Oregon is a big territory, so I could see having two projects from Eastern Oregon, but we have limited funds in this next round coming up, and I think we need to be a little cautious about spreading the money out. Thank you.
And then Laura, go for it.
I just wanted to echo what Doug was saying, that to me, the most important thing is that we're getting the highest quality projects. I certainly have been around for the long, long history of conversations about spreading the money out across the state. So I fully support that, but it seems like we really want to focus on getting the highest quality projects. And if in one grant cycle, there's a little bit more on the east side or a little bit more on the west side, I wouldn't be too worried about that. This is such a tiny amount of money given the need that may happen, and that seems fine. So in this round, I would support in that order, kind of prioritizing the best projects. And then if we need to do some kind of tiebreaker and geography comes into play, I think that's fine. So that would be my thoughts on this round. The other thing I would just say, though, in general, is I think that it is really important for the commission to be able to weigh in on this and not necessarily make and I don't think that's what you're asking for, but sort of responding maybe a little bit to Ed, your comment. I think it's really important for the commission to be fine-tuning as we go forward, learning lessons from the past grant cycle, and then tweaking a little bit if necessary going forward. So I appreciate being asked a question about geography, and I think that's really the commission's role, as I see it, is to keep improving the program as much as possible. And this is just one of the ways that we might do that. So maybe it would be good to have more than one meeting if that's what we're being asked to do, or a little more time or a little more background. But in general, I really appreciate being asked this question. And yeah, so thank you.
Okay. Well, and Doug, I see two more hands up. You want me to call on folks?
Yep, keep going.
Okay. So I see Sarah and then Amanda.
I'm just wondering if we can move past this it sounds like we're needing a statement. And I think that I'm hearing people saying pretty much the same thing, that we could have a statement that says if all else is equal between highly prioritized projects, then geographical distribution may be considered or will be considered. But I think having a statement like that might move us through the conversation. Amanda?
Amanda, you on?
That I like the if-then statement. And I also agree with all of my fellow commissioners and what they've had to share so far. It also sounds like we're kind of segueing ourselves into the second question of maybe, you know, a little bit of a weighted rank. Like we probably can't get all the way to a full-on scoring rubric right now, but it does sound like we're all kind of prioritizing the same thing when it comes to the applicants of, you know, the strength of the proposal. And so, you know, is that where we could maybe glance at some of the rubric kind of section headings or something like stewardship or threat to the land, and maybe focus on that instead of the geographic area?
Okay, we could certainly do that. I would, if we want to make a statement on this geographic area, I'd like to see somebody make a motion on that. Sarah, you kind of had you almost made a motion and then you didn't make it a motion. So you
Okay.
want to do it in the form of a motion and we'll see if we have support.
Sure. I would make a motion to have a statement by the commission that says, if all else is equal between highly prioritized projects, that geographical distribution may be considered.
Is there a second to a motion?
I'll
like
second
that?
it. Nancy, second it.
Nancy, thank you. Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? If not, I'm going to call for the vote. Taylor, before I call for the vote, are you good with a motion like that?
Yeah, I was trying to read Robin's facial expressions, and I think maybe she's
Good
looking at the
luck.
guidance document. I just want to make sure it's the language that we have is going to be workable to incorporate into the
I
guidance.
understand. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is more specific to the consideration that the commission will have when it comes to looking at applications. So that I will, just so you all know, pretty much take that motion verbatim and put it into the guidance.
Okay.
To Amanda's point, geographic distribution, location of the property is nowhere in our evaluation criteria. So this is an additional policy consideration that the commission is essentially making. So it's a good thing to be able to separate those two out and make the statement in the guidance of commission rather than it be kind of try to weave it into some criteria where it hasn't been stated.
Okay, thank you, Robin, Taylor. Anybody
Mark-
else with discussion?
Mark, Vargas, did you have something to say or did you put your hand down?
Yeah, I put my hand down. You guys covered it. I was just gonna elaborate more, but Taylor and Robin, we're good.
Okay, any further discussion? We're gonna go to the vote. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, all those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Then the motion passes. Thank you. The next item, or the second of the three items that Taylor brought up, was the budget. And on that one, I do have a preference there. Our very first go around, I know a lot of you guys weren't here at that point in time, but we had a project that would have taken, well, basically did take all the funds, and it was just one project. And I know even though it prioritized at the top of the list, as a commission, we funded it along with other projects, and we lowered the dollar amount that we sent to that project. And of course, that was all after the fact. And so I would really like to see us limit the size of a project, especially in a round where we have limited funding, so that not everything goes to just one project. And I don't know, we got 1.7 some odd dollars. Do we put the budget limit for any one project at $1 million, or do we put it at 750,000? But I would surely like to see us limit the size, the amount of money that we send to any one project, so that we fund as many as possible and don't end up with all our eggs in one basket. Somebody's got their hand up.
You generated quite a few hands, Doug, if you want me to call them.
You call on them, Taylor, because I can't see who the hands belong to.
Okay, so we'll go with Amanda and then Mark and then Dan. So Amanda, go for it.
I agree with not wanting to put all our eggs in one basket for sure. And I don't necessarily have any point to the contrary of that, other than to ask the question of whether it's been problematic these last two easement funding cycles when the commission has gone with a different award amount for the project lower than what the request was. Because I believe we had to do that last time as well in order to fund the number of projects that we wanted to. More asking the question, which method we think will work better, to put a cap on the proposal ask or to retain the ability to just award differently than what the proposal ask is.
I could weigh in on that if you'd like, Doug.
Go ahead, please.
So, I mean, it's kind of the reason we're bringing it to the commission, Amanda, is it is kind of almost like a philosophical question. So, I mean, the whole thrust behind us trying to work toward developing a rubric is to give as much information to applicants on the front end about what projects the commission is going to prioritize. And so it's really, we're trying to get at the same thing here. If there's going to be some kind of unofficial funding cap, like the commission is not going to fund projects over a certain dollar amount or deprioritize them if they are, expensive to a certain degree. I think it's only fair to applicants that we communicate as much as possible about that on the front end. And as to your question as to has it created problems, so it has created complications, that's for sure. Whenever you partially fund a project, there's not enough money to do everything that they propose to do in the application. And so it makes it pretty tricky as staff and then also as applicants to figure out which aspects of the project are being cut when the award is reduced. On top of that, we did just go through rulemaking, as many of you remember, and we closed a loophole that would allow an applicant with an open OAHP grant to come back in to seek additional funding, which is what happened that first time. We partially funded a project. They didn't have enough. They came back in the next round, got another grant to almost make themselves whole and get the project over the finish line. That is no longer going to be allowed, just because it honestly does create a lot of confusion. And so, yeah, you would be, by partially funding a project, I think the way we are structured now would be a lot trickier to guarantee it's going to get over the finish line. So I'm going to let Renee jump ahead because I think she's probably has some clarifying thoughts on what I just said, and then we'll go back to commissioners.
What you described, Taylor, is exactly correct. I do think from the perspective of broader OWEB board deliberations, we really avoid changing budgets at time of award. And Mark Labhart can speak to this. That can create chaos for applicants. So I do think if there is some kind of signal we can send up front, that would be great. I did just pull up the range of asks from the last cycle. I think at the same time, I would just create some, ask to create some consideration among all of you to not try to spread 1.76 so thinly across that if you're contemplating a cap, not to have an arbitrarily low cap that just does not even make it feasible for a partner on the ground to develop a project with a landowner. These are still real property transactions. So just being mindful of if there's a cap set, maybe not setting that so low in hopes of getting 10 projects out of this and having a project cap that just isn't even feasible to have a conversation with a landowner. So I think those are just the two considerations I would ask if the board or if the commission is contemplating a cap.
Taylor, who else we got?
Mark, why don't you go, followed by Dan?
Thank you. So again, yeah, just being new to the program, I assume that grant applicants have always exceeded the available amount of money to spend for that biennium, correct? Let me just preface that first. Yeah, that's what I was
Yes.
doing. So I understand the thought here about big project gobbling up most of the money, but a firm number to me doesn't really, it doesn't seem feasible at this point because you'd have to change it all the time based on how much you're allowed every other year by the legislature. But perhaps no project shall exceed a certain percentage of the allowable. If we did go that way, would be a better cap than to pick a number. So I just throw that out.
Yeah, that's something we could work on. But I think what we're asking as staff is for this round specifically. We're not doing rulemaking here or anything. We just want to make sure we're able to let applicants know how their applications are going to be considered. But Dan, go for it.
Yeah, I agree with what Doug was saying earlier. I mean, it seems like a cap for this round of I don't know, 50% of the total budget would be pretty reasonable. That would fit. I was just looking, 7 of the 10 applications we got last time. There were 3, obviously. There was one that was practically double what the new budget is, but 50% that way we're able to fund any 2 given projects that apply. Potentially, if they both come in at exactly 50%, but I don't know, that seems like kind of it's arbitrary, but right down the middle. No one project can get more than half seems reasonable to me.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. I'm just going to keep running down the list, Doug, unless you cut me off.
Please do.
Okay. Laura and then Jan.
Thanks, Taylor. So I'm gonna suggest something a little bit different, and that is that we go with just recognizing that we're only going to be able to do 2, maybe 3 projects. I appreciate the impulse to divide it down the middle, but I think these projects are all appraised. They all come in at different numbers. I don't need to. It doesn't seem as important to say that one gets, everybody gets half. If you have a program or a project come through, it's great. It's costing a little more than half of what we have now. I'd like to see it come through and maybe we fund something a little bit less. So that would be my suggestion. I also just want to acknowledge that our applicants are extremely savvy and they know exactly how much money we have right now. And so I would love to see people apply with their best projects, because the other thing we're trying to do here is demonstrate that there is a tremendous need. I mean, I think those of us who've been doing this for a while see that, feel that, know that pretty clearly. But if we make the cap too low, then I think that some of our best projects across the state are not going to put their hat in the ring this round because we're cutting them off before we even see the project. So I think I guess I feel like, folks know that what the funding situation is. I would like to see the applicants far exceed this number, because I think that, again, the need is really out there, and it would be great to go to the legislature during the next round and argue that this is a really important. And I mean, in our conservation district, our budget for our East Multnomah, half the county, is significantly larger for land conservation. So this is just a drop in the bucket. I appreciate that we're doing another cycle. I think it's really important to do that, but let's get as many projects in the door so that hopefully we can keep growing the program. I also have a question, and that is, are there any projects that we funded that for some reason didn't go through, got canceled? Is there any more money available? Or is this really for sure the only number we're looking at?
At this very moment in time, this is the amount of money we have. There are quite a few projects that have yet to close, so there's always the chance that there's more money that comes into the program. But at this moment, this is what we have.
I think maybe, Laura, to put a finer point on it, any project that has been canceled, we worked with all of you to recapture that available funding back into the OAHP spending plan, into the appropriate line item. So anything that's already canceled was built into, I think in all cases, it went into the last grant round and helped a lot during that last grant round. Certainly, I think to Taylor's point, if something surprising happens with anything that has not yet closed, then we would do the same. We would use the same approach. We'd come back to you, ask you to recapture that into the line item for easements, if that is the route you all go.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Jan, and then John, and then Nancy.
Yes, I'd like to see a cap of 750,000, but that means we could have projects up to that amount. So we may have some smaller ones, we may have a larger one, but it gives a little bit of guidance.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, working land easements. Easements are what they are, and they come along when they come along. And we're limiting the scale we can work at with a cap. If a certain easement comes along, we'll have to either fund it or not. And I'd be hesitant to go with a cap. I think the message should be put out that it's going to be a tough funding cycle, and fund the projects that are the best projects, not limit the scale we can work at going in. And I think that's where I'm at.
Appreciate that, John. Nancy?
I love the back and forth. So I'm sort of sensitive to the amount of time that an applicant needs to put into submitting a proposal. I've heard, it's over 100 hours of work to get a project in. So I'm supportive of some kind of cap or guidance so that projects that are less likely to be funded because of the high dollar amount, all that work isn't put into getting the application in September. Early on, when we had that one application, that the number was a little squishy, and I think we felt comfortable reducing the funding amount, but I don't think we're going to have that kind of situation where we can take a project that's asking for 1.7 and give it 5. So I'd like to have some guidance about, I mean, just given the commission's interest in geographic diversity and funding multiple projects, project cost is going to be a consideration. That type of thing.
Yeah, and I think, again, the reason we're bringing this to the commission is we don't have an evaluation criteria around project cost, just like we don't have one around geography. And so whether it's guidance or a firm cap, we would like to be signaling to applicants to some degree that if the commission has a preference, what does that look like? Renee?
Yeah, Taylor, just a quick follow on to maybe what both John and Nancy were getting at. So in our post-fire recovery grant offering, when general funds were provided for that a few years ago, after the 2020 and 2021 fire seasons, we did not set a firm cap per se, but did have guidance, a message in the guidance around, this is a statewide program. This will be highly competitive. Please be mindful of that as you're putting together your project budget. So I haven't tracked down the exact language, but just putting that out there as a way that might be able to balance some of what we're hearing, to be transparent, but yet if there is not, or if there's some hesitation about a cap, we might be able to, I think, just message honestly to folks about the competitive nature and the statewide nature of the program.
I see Sarah has her hand up.
I appreciate that, Renee, and knowing that that has happened before and there is language already developed for that and increasing transparency, I think I'm not making a motion this time, but I am supportive of not doing a cap and using that language we've already developed and put the hard thought into and being transparent in that. We do have savvy partners. Laura is very right.
Okay. So Renee, you talked about language. Do you want us to try and come up with similar language without you being able to put your fingers on it right now? Or can we say we want some kind of language that just says we're going to be so competitive, we're going to try and fund multiple projects even with this smaller amount of money? What can we do? And I don't know if Renee or Taylor wants to address that, but I think that's where we're headed.
I see Renee furiously clicking through documents, but I don't know that she's found it yet. I think
I haven't, but yes,
okay.
I'll continue to try.
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing, Doug, is that it sounds like most commissioners have an interest in not having one project take all the money. But that being said, also not wanting to limit your ability to fund the best projects that come through the door because they cost what they cost.
Yep.
And it sounds like we have some language that would get at that sentiment. And so I don't know that, and Robin or Renee speak up, but I don't think we need a motion if we can generally have that. That's what I've heard. And so speak up, commissioners, if I'm mischaracterizing anybody's perspective. But generally we want to signal to applicants that we understand projects cost what they cost. We only have a certain amount of money, and all things being equal, again, the commission has an interest in, funding multiple projects. And so cost has the potential to weigh on the commission's decisions.
I think that good thing we're recording it. We can use language very similar to that for this round. And I know, John, I'm sensitive to what you're saying, but boy, if we had $15 million of funding instead of $1.7 million of funding. This statement to the prospective applicants would be way different than what we're talking about today. So that's how I look at this particular round. So okay, does anybody have anything more they want to talk about on the budget part? If not, we're going to go to waiting. Okay, going on to waiting is what we're going to do. And we've talked about that a little bit back and forth here as we talked about these first two bullet items. I would really like to see this commission going to more of a weighted application, or what did we call it? A scoring rubric. I know for a fact we don't have time to get that all discussed and put in place for this round. But speaking of this round, I think we need to make it clear that we are gonna at least discuss the possibility of heading that way. And I would think we'd want to have a meeting sometime in the future where that is going to be one of the only topics we would be talking about. So the two questions for you guys. Number one, does anybody want to put weighting or scoring on any of the aspects of these projects that we're talking about this round? And if not, how anxious is the rest of the commission in moving forward with a scoring rubric for our applications?
And I see
floor is open.
I see Laura and then Jan.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Doug. I am 100% behind this. I think we've been talking for quite a while around this issue, and I feel like there's almost close to complete consensus around getting close to the NRCS, closer to the NRCS program, since that is what this program was built for. And it just seems like we could learn from that. Or yes, a scoring rubric would help us get closer to that. Also, what Washington State is doing, I would love to take a deep dive into especially those two, but we probably have other opportunities to look at other programs around the country and see how we can make this work better, have more transparency. We have a few rounds under our belt, and I feel like this is a great way to go. I would love to see a panel of the applicants. I think that would be helpful to just hear directly from the folks who have been really using the program and knee deep in it. Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to improve it, and I'm 100% behind moving towards a scoring.
And Laura, I don't want to let you off the hook quite yet, but you talked about the second part of my question. The first part is, do we or you want to see weighting or scoring on any of the aspects of the application for this go around?
I'm open to that, but I don't have a specific proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I see Jan.
Yes, I very much support the rubric. I know that the Water Resources Commission uses a rubric for the grants that we provide, and it's very helpful to not only the Technical Review Committee, but to the commissioners as well. And I totally agree that we should have the panel of some of our partners, as Nellie suggested, come and talk to us in a meeting about what they would see as workable as well. I don't think we should set any special requirements on this small amount of money in this round. I don't know how viable that would actually be. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Taylor?
Mark Vargas.
Yeah, I don't think this round limited amount of money, we should set any parameters on that, but you know, I am in support of creating some form of consistency, but haven't been through this before with a program that didn't have a rubric and then had a rubric. You know, there'll be some bumps and hiccups and snivels and complaints along the way, but I think overall it's usually a more fair system. So I just throw that out.
Thank you. Taylor, we got any more?
Laura's hand is still up, but I think it might be a stale hand. So speak up, Laura, if you want to. Otherwise, what I'm hearing, Doug, is you guys are interested in doing some more work as a commission coming out of this meeting in rubric development, because it will require a couple to several commission meetings, I think, if we're going to get there. So just being transparent about what you guys are signing yourselves up for. I do see Sarah's hand, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo all three of the folks that just supported this, and Doug. I think it's a really smart choice. I think that, you know, if applicants are putting in this much time to develop applications, that they deserve transparency in the scoring. And I think that we can put in the work to develop that, and kind of what, building off what Mark said, you know, we may have to like fine tune things a little bit each cycle, but I think we'll get closer, and something is better than nothing. Good.
Okay. Your hand is still up, Sarah, but I know you're taking it down. Okay, so I'm gonna move on past that waiting part. I got general consensus that we're not gonna wait any of this cycle's applicants, and we'll work on that going forward. We need a motion on the spending plan, is that correct, Taylor?
That is very important, yes.
That's what I thought. So the motion I'm looking for, well, it's in the agenda. Does anybody want to make it, or do they want me to move it? Hearing none, I will move that the commission adopt a spending plan allocating all available funds, 1.76 million, to the Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easement Grant Program to support the 25-26 grant solicitation. Is there a second?
Second. Ed Contreras.
Seconded by Ed. Further discussion on the motion? Everybody wants to go back to work. That's hard to believe. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Anybody abstain? Motion passes, Taylor.
Great.
And Sarah gets to do item D.
All right, moving through it, we are going to hear from Dan Bigelow on the relationship between conservation easements and farm investment. And Dan is an assistant professor of applied ecology at OSU and our OSU Extension representative. Dan, I will hand it to you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, quick clarification. I applied economics, so not a real scientist, but I appreciate that. Yeah, but thanks to Taylor for taking me up and allowing me to kind of talk to everyone today, and thanks, of course, to everyone for sticking around a few extra minutes. Can you all see my screen? I'm showing my
Yes.
slide here. Yeah. So I just wanted to give a quick rundown of a recent publication that I think has a lot of relevance to OAHP's kind of mission and purpose. So it's about conservation easements and farm investment. And so you can see the citation for the paper down here. My co-author on it, Connor McCollum, he was a former master's student of mine at Montana State in my previous job. And he's now at Kansas Farm Management Association, but this work is kind of in turn based on his Montana State master's thesis. And so just to kind of fix ideas on the perspective we take in the paper, so we're kind of looking at the relationship between easements and farm investment sort of through a farm financial lens. And so just to get everyone on the same page here, by conservation easement, we're talking about the transfer of development rights essentially to a land trust in exchange for tax benefits or cash that go to the landowner, right? And so farmland, it's the most important asset that most producers own if they own their land. And it's often relied on as a source of collateral in securing loans that are then used to invest in their operation. Okay, and so when land is subject to development pressure, if it's on the outskirts of a growing city, for example, its value is going to be bid up due to these expected future development returns being capitalized into its price. And so this can form, a pretty significant share of farmland asset values in certain areas, right? And these capitalized future development returns are kind of, in a broad sense, what we think of as forming the basis for the value of a conservation easement, right? So it's the value of the property rights that the landowner is essentially giving up by putting an easement on their land. Okay, and so there are kind of two related research questions that we kind of try to get at in the paper. And so the first concerns the extent to which these future development returns, right, that haven't yet been realized, but are capitalized into land prices, the extent to which those are kind of liquid from a farm investment standpoint, right? So how much can landowners actually rely on these when they're going about trying to secure farm-related loans? And secondly, if there is sort of a credit constraint in this regard, what role might conservation easements play in easing it? Easements easing, that was not a pun, an intended pun there, but I'll go with it. Okay, and so again, a lot of this comes down to how kind of modern farm finance institutions work. And so why might lenders not fully account for future development returns in their collateral appraisals for farm-related loans, right? It's not, of course, because they're ignorant of the way land markets work, but rather there are kind of rational good reasons for them to not take this into account. So first we have default risk. So you want the value of the collateral to in some way reflect the purpose of the loan. And if the loan is going to be taken out for ag purposes and it's going to be serviced, the debt will be serviced with farm income. That mismatch could potentially, by taking into account these development returns, could, lead to a heightened default risk. Housing markets are uncertain. They can be quite volatile, and it's kind of hard for lenders to, put too much confidence into how those things will evolve in the future when they're making their appraisals. And then also preferences for liquidation. So if there is a default, the land's generally going to go to auction. They may not be able to recoup the full market value, the bank that is. And so as a result, this is why we tend to see things like collateral to loan value ratios in excess of 100%, right? So, and kind of the main premise here of what we're talking about is that if producers cannot in fact access this development-oriented land capital through these traditional lending channels, then easements may have a role in that they're the only kind of option at their disposal that allows them to do so while still remaining in farm production, right? Of course, they could sell the land, but that kind of runs against, what easements are going to be preventing. Okay, and so we're not the first people to talk about this link. There's an earlier paper that kind of lays out the conceptual thinking behind this and uses some survey data for the kind of mid-Atlantic region of the US to look at how producers are, how and why producers are actually using easement-related funding. Okay, and so the first thing we do in the paper with the data that we have is we construct a set of what I'll call a farm real estate debt to asset ratio for each year. That's every 5 years from 2002 to 2022. And so basically what we're doing is we're looking at the fraction of the total value of farm real estate in a county that's secured by farm real estate itself. So how much are they leveraging that value of farm real estate when they go about securing loans? And then we look at correlations in different years between this debt to asset ratio measure and different variables that represent development pressure. Okay, and so the two types of development pressure we look at are population density, right? So that could be a signal that the city is going to grow in the future as population gets denser. It's going to, the city will eventually expand outward. And then also kind of a more historical measure of the actual amount of farmland that was developed over a recent historical period that kind of predates the years for this debt to asset ratio measure. Right, and so in general, we find in the paper that there's a strong negative correlation between the amount of farm real estate that's being leveraged and development pressure, right? So this is kind of consistent with the idea that producers in more development-prone areas, potentially face this type of credit constraint. Of course, there are also reasons why they might not be taking out larger loans where they're pledging their land as collateral, but it's at least consistent with that story. And so this is something that I just looked at yesterday, but I looked to see whether or not Oregon was any different, right? Does Oregon show kind of a different pattern? And it actually does. It's generally the opposite, which, I don't want to over speculate, but it's kind of consistent with the idea that land use regulations in Oregon, urban growth boundaries, of course, in particular, kind of limit the, how large these capitalized future development returns are when it comes to the value of land, right? And so it's kind of the same thinking along that kind of goes hand in hand with why, we tend to have fewer conservation easements than other similar states in the West and throughout the US. Kind of a similar thinking there, but again, I don't want to hang too much on that type of speculation. But so for the main analysis that we do, we use easements from the National Conservation Easement Database, or NCED, which is a collaboration between the Trust for Public Land and Ducks Unlimited. And basically what they do is they collect through voluntary contributions by land trusts information on the types of easements that they're holding, where they're located, the purpose, who the who's actually holding the easement. Is it a land trust or some other type of entity, a government entity? And so it covers all easements in the US, all conservation easements. And so to try to focus on ones that are related to agriculture or that still allow farm production while the easement's in place, we focus on ones that have either an explicit farm or ranch purpose listed in the data, but a lot of the easements are actually missing the purpose, right? Or it's some type of general environmental conservation that maybe still allows for farm practices, but it isn't explicitly listed that way. And so to supplement this smaller sample of ones that have a farm or ranch purpose, we also just include any conservation easement where at least 20% of the area is in cropland or grazing cover from kind of satellite-based imagery. And so you can see here, these are just the agricultural easement establishment years that we have. Most of those are taking place in the early 2000s. The easements really weren't much of a thing before the 1980s. The federal tax deduction that allows easements to be treated as a charitable contribution was phased in the 1970s. And so we kind of focus from then on, but most of them are in the early 2000s. And so here are just a few maps at the state level, where on the left we have just the number of agricultural easements per state. And you can see that most of the states with a lot of easements tend to be in kind of the Northeast, Midwest region. Colorado also has a ton. And then when we look at this on an acreage basis, you can kind of see that distribution shift west, where states like Montana, Wyoming, California, New Mexico start to pop out as well. But Oregon, on the whole, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we rank pretty low. And again, I should have mentioned this, but the NCED data, they're incomplete. It's, voluntary contributions by land trusts. It's basically, the best we have to work with, but they are incomplete. It's not a proper census of all easements that are actually active in the US. But, you know, in terms of the number of easements in Oregon, in our version of the data, we have 119, right? So that ranks 41st out of the lower 48. Acreage basis, we're a little bit higher, 36th, but still, you know, pretty low. And then when we put this as a percent of farmland or a percent of private land, again, you know, we're 40th and 41st, right? So relatively few easements in Oregon compared to other states, which I think, you know, highlights in part the importance of the work that, you know, the OAHP allows us to do. And so turning then to this kind of relationship between easement activity and farm investment. So the easement variables that we create from this data, everything's at the county level here. We look at lagged changes in the percent of farmland in easements over 3 previous 5-year periods for a given year, right? And so we look at it this way because, you know, the investment data are only available every 5 years, and we include 3 because the federal tax deduction for an easement as a charitable contribution can be taken over a maximum of 15 years, right? So we're kind of covering that whole period where, you know, landowners could conceivably still be receiving, you know, incentive benefits from the easement. And so the correlations we get out of our statistical model are essentially comparing changes within counties over time between these lagged easement variables and different investment outcomes. Okay, and so for the specific types of investment we look at different types or different signals of land ownership. So the percent of land that's owned in what are referred to, what the USDA refers to as part owner operations. So these are operations that have a mix of rented and owned land. It's kind of, you know, generally what most or a majority of commercial farm enterprises in the US look like from kind of a land tenure perspective. The percent of expenses that are spent on rent, right, which kind of goes in the other direction, and the percent spent on property taxes, right, which is kind of a muddier relationship because, of course, we get, you know, you run into preferential property tax treatment for farmland owners, so on and so forth. But we have it, so we look at it, and we also look at just the percent of expenses spent on interest payments of all sorts as kind of a general investment or debt relief measure. The number of tractors in use as kind of a broad representation of machinery capital investment, and then also the number of hired workers, labor. And that includes both full and part-time workers. Okay, so I'm not going to throw up any equations or tables, bog everyone down in that, but the findings basically suggest that counties with more easements are associated with an increase in the percent of land owned by producers, and a decrease in rent expenses, which kind of go hand in hand potentially. We don't find anything for property taxes, which again is, you know, kind of not surprising. No change in interest expenses, which again is kind of like an ambiguous relationship to begin with, because you could think that easements are either being used to pay down existing debt or potentially to, you know, put producers in a better financial position to take on more debt. So that's kind of ambiguous to begin with, but no real difference that we uncover with this model. An increase in the number of tractors in use, and then a weaker increase, or I should say statistically weaker increase in the number of hired farm workers, right? And so, I think the paper in general kind of lends support to to what a lot of us probably already thought, and what we learned from things like surveys of producers who have easements and their motivations for using them. And then also looking through things like easement proposals and, as we were just talking about, but, it is always nice to see anecdotes like that kind of confirmed or, borne out in other types of data kind of more systematically. In general, the percent of land accounted for by easements in different counties is pretty small, right? So doing all of this at the county level isn't ideal. And so starting to think about, how can we actually match the parcel level easement data that we have, which is, pretty rich. There's 62,000 farm easements in the data that we're working with, or what we call farm easements. Thinking about different ways to use potentially satellite data and so forth to link getting easements to more kind of granular, fine scale investment outcomes. And then thinking a little bit too about other types of policy levers at work that affect both investment behavior and, the incentives that people have to put easements on their land. In particular, state level tax credit policies for easement donation, which I think are in place in, 10 to 12 states or something like that. And kind of exploiting that as a way to put, another spin on how easements affect producers, what producers are able to do, basically. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Happy to take any questions. I hope I didn't go too far over time. I know everyone's itching to get out of here, but yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Dan. That was awesome. Mark, you got a question or thought?
Yeah, just a quick question. So, Dan, interesting stuff. I know there's incentives, tax incentives and different things with farms putting some of their property in easements as well as grants and different things. But did you guys look at what the overall value of the real estate, the property would be with an easement versus not an easement? Is it that simple to do?
So that's pretty, I think that's pretty hard to do. That's the ideal. You would have to, we have a bunch of property value data, actual land transaction data. So it would take, matching that with the individual easements and then looking at what properties actually sell for after the easements in place. But we don't have the actual like appraisal data when the easement values are come up, when they're developed. Because what I mean, yeah, it's kind of like a counterfactual, I guess, where you're getting paid for something that you're giving up, right? And the difference, of course, is the value of the easement. So we don't have that for the individual easements.
Yeah, and that was the question. I mean,
Yeah.
You alluded to a little bit with Oregon being a little different. We do have a lot of land use issues, land use laws that restrict what you can and can't do with your lands. But for many years working with Oregon Fish and Wildlife on the habitat side, trying to get landowners to participate in habitat projects and what have you, most are very reluctant to put anything in a conservation easement because they always state the land value would drop. The value of their land would be, they don't want it. They don't want conservation easements. So I was trying to see what is it? What's the truth to that? Is it real? Is it not real? Is it offset by tax benefits? I don't know. I just threw that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a real, I would say that's real. Like the market value, just simply because if you're going to sell land to, if a developer wants to buy your land, they're, generally going to give you a lot more than any type of farm production that you could be doing. So it's kind of, I think the purpose of what we look at in this paper is to kind of think about, what role are easements playing in actually allowing producers to tap into that source of land value in a way that kind of promotes greater farm resilience, right? And yeah.
Thank you.
Dan, I got a question. This is Doug Kramer.
Yeah.
I've always felt that if a farmer participated in one of these programs and got a conservation easement, and yes, it lowers the value of the piece of property. Hopefully we've compensated him for that. But I would have thought that farmer then would have turned around and put most of that investment back in the property in the form of a higher value crop or a more intense type of farming operation, but really didn't seem like that in the numbers you were showing, but maybe I wasn't reading them correctly.
I mean, I think that is kind of what we try to get to a little bit more indirectly, I guess, or from a broader viewpoint. But things like an increase in land owned, right, an expansion of the operation, an increase in the number of tractors that are in use as kind of capital machinery, and then an increase in the number of hired farm laborers, could be, a signal of a change in crop choice or something like that.
Yeah, it says a weaker increase in number of hired farm workers. So I was assuming that meant less farm workers, but more tractors.
I would say weaker in terms of like the confidence that we have in kind of pinning that down.
Okay.
I 100% am with you on, there being like looking at something like crop choice is something that I would have liked to have been able to do, but it's really hard to generalize something like that across the US. But when you kind of drill down, what I was talking about at the end was looking at, these satellite data products that have, whether it's corn or soybeans or, a vineyard, that's kind of the sort of thing that I was hinting at there.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Okay.
I think that comment's spot on. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do see Mark Labhart has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. So Dan, that was very interesting and helpful for me personally, better understanding now. But my question has to do with that one chart where you showed the rest of the states and where we were in Oregon, and, like Montana, where they've increased. What did you do any work on what funding sources were most of those legislative dollars that were allocated, or were they grant dollars, federal, other states, or NGO dollars? Where'd the dollars come from in those other states? Is it similar to Oregon or different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know that off the top of my head. I looked at some of the ones in Oregon specifically, and it'll say for some of the easements, it's again, it's kind of one of these incomplete data fields, but it'll say whether it's in ALE or USDA NRCS funded project. And a lot of the ones that we have for Oregon are it's not like a systematic listing of the funding sources. So it's really kind of like combing through just tens of thousands of text strings. I didn't look at Montana in particular. Montana definitely does have quite a bit of NRCS involvement, but I couldn't put a percentage on that. But that's a great point.
Thank you.
Yep.
Looks like we have maybe time for one more short question, if anybody has one or a comment. Otherwise, for folks on the commission and for folks in YouTube land, there's a link to Dan's paper in the agenda. You can dig into it there.
All right. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Dan. And will you stop sharing your screen when you get a
Yes.
chance? Awesome. And I will hand it back to Doug.
Okay, so we're down towards the tail end of our meeting. Does anybody else have any other business they want us to transact at this time?
I have a couple things.
I knew you would, Taylor. Go for it.
Okay, so first up, just wanted to close the loop. If you remember, last time the commission made recommendations on awarding conservation management planning grants. So the commission recommended that 5 projects for funding totaling $752,524 to fund, like I mentioned, 5 conservation management planning grants to develop and then begin implementation of the CMPs. And that money came out of the Natural and Working Lands Fund. So those went to the board at their July 23rd meeting, and the board concurred with the commission's recommendation and awarded the 5 recommended projects fully as recommended by the commission. So just want to close that loop. No curveballs there. Mark was there. So thank you for helping to carry that to the board, Mark. I don't know if you have anything to add on that front, but it was a pretty uneventful agenda item right before lunch, if I remember.
We like uneventful when it comes to OAHP at the OWEB board level.
Well, that's because you guys do such a good job.
Oh, yeah, right. But thank you.
Yeah, well, I think there's some building trust there, so that's great. The other thing is our esteemed chair, Doug Kramer, will be leaving us at the end of the year. He's terming out. So very sad to think about that happening, but it is coming for us. And so we're going to be recruiting for another farmer and rancher seat, which is nominated by the Board of Agriculture. So just wanted to put that on folks' radars. If you know people who might be interested, feel free to put them in touch with me. I'd be happy to talk them through the process and what that looks like. And we'll be putting out a more formal recruitment here in the not too distant future. So hard shoes to fill, but we are going to have to fill them. So put your thinking caps on. And then the other thing is I was going to kick it to Renee. Renee had a few things to share about the operations funding for, I think, staffing and associated operations for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program at OWEB. So Renee, if you're still with us, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. So we had the pleasure of talking through how you all wanted to allocate the 1.76 million in grant funding that emerged from legislative session. I'm very thankful for that. It does sound as though we've heard since session closed a few inquiries that I think represent some confusion out there. There was a lot swirling around towards the tail end of session and as session evolved, honestly. So just wanted to make sure the commission was clear, anyone listening on YouTube is clear about what we do and do not have by way of operations side of the house funding for OHP. So we did have one-time allocations made for grants and operations during session, one-time allocations though. So there's been some confusion about now this is built into OWEB's base budget, this is permanent funding. That is not the case on either the grants or operations side. So we had two different policy packages at play in our budget. One provided the necessary staff funding for the two OHP positions for the first 12 months of the 24-month biennium. We had a second policy package that was added late in the game that provided additional position authority, which state agencies need to have folks on staff, and funding for one of the positions for the second 12 months of the biennium. So I just want to make clear that we are not, as currently staffed for OHP, we are not whole at this point for the biennium. So clearly that's something that's on our minds. We will be meeting next month and are in relatively regular communication with program advocates to understand what their plans are for upcoming legislative sessions, both short session in 26 and looking towards long session. And we will continue as an agency across our programs, but certainly as it relates to OHP, to watch revenue forecasts. So the next revenue forecast is coming out in late August. We'll just continue to keep a pulse on that as it relates to likely funding available for state agency needs as we're moving towards short session. So just wanted to make sure folks are clear on that. I think that if Sarah, our director, may join for the next commission meeting, we'll see. But I think that Sarah would note for all of you that we work hard to retain the people who we have at OWEB, who are amazing people. So that is front of mind for us, and we'll continue to work for program advocates since they are the best champions for the programs, both OHP and other programs that we have as we look towards those legislative conversations. So just wanted to put that out there and see if folks have any questions and know that it's on our radar and of great importance to us. Okay, seeing no questions. Thanks, Taylor, for letting me just use this opportunity to help clarify any of the confusion that might be out there.
Great, thanks, Renee. And I guess one other thing was popping for me, Doug, while Renee was talking and just reflecting on what we talked about at this meeting. So what I heard from commissioners is that sort of while we are in the process of opening a conservation easement solicitation with the spending plan you just adopted, you're also interested in putting in some legwork for developing a rubric for potential future cycles. And so we'll need to work on scheduling some meetings to do that. So keep an eye out for some scheduling emails from me. We'll get together as a OWEB staff and kind of think through a cadence on that. But like I mentioned, I think it will likely take at least 2 meetings before we're ready to run a cycle, depending on how much legwork we can do between meetings.
Okay, that sounds good. Anybody else got anything for our other business category? If not, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.